search keywords like epic fantasy or cozy mysteries or stuff like that, they're really competitive and they don't convert that well. If you're a cozy mystery reader, you're not going to search for cozy mystery books on Amazon. Usually, you're going to search for your favorite author, or you're going to search for a particular book title. You're not really going to use search that much.
Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm very excited to have Ricardo Fayette with us. Ricardo is one of the 4 founders of Reedsy, a marketplace connecting authors to the world's top publishing talent, from editors to cover designers, book marketers, translators, you name it. He's the author of 2 books on marketing for authors and a regular presenter at several prestigious writers' conferences, including NEEC, 20 Books, RWA, Self-Publishing Show Live, and many others. Ricardo, thanks so much for taking the time to share your insights and everything else, and happy to chat with you.
No, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, this should be fun. I just want to start off by saying that I have read one of your books, the Amazon Ads for Authors.
Thank you.
Perfect. I have the Kindle version, and I have to say it's one of not only the most comprehensive resources on Amazon Ads for Authors, as the title would suggest, but honestly, it's one of the best pieces of content on the subject that I've read, no matter what you're selling. Granted, it does have a lot specifically to authors, but even if you're not selling books, there's a lot of principles that would still be relevant to you.
No, thank you. That's a lot for you. Yeah.
I fully endorse it. I think we agreed on pretty much everything. There wasn't really anything I went through that was like, oh, wait a second. It's like, which happens a lot when I'm reading content. It's like, I would do things different. It's like, it's honestly, I mean, if you're an author, there's going to be specific things that is really useful for you as far as like targeting and all the category stuff and things that I wouldn't necessarily be aware of not being an author. But it was interesting to see how we kind of came to the same conclusions and aligned on a lot of the things. But so I just wanted to get that out of the way. I started like fangirl over you a little bit, but
thank you.
But yeah, if you're doing it, get the book, whichever one. Which one has a higher royalty, the paperback or the ebook?
I think that both of them are more or less the same.
Oh, okay. I was trying to buy the one that makes you more money.
Thank you.
So maybe we could just start by telling us like a little bit about your journey of how you got to where you are as Amazon Ads expert and deciding to write a book.
Yeah, for sure. So I started in the industry and the publishing industry when I co-founded Reedsy with the other founders back in 2014. And as you mentioned in the intro, Reedsy is a marketplace where authors can come in and meet editors, proofreaders, cover designers, etc. We started with editing and cover design, and then soon we added marketing, translation, and other services. And since I take care of most of the marketing, I'm CMO at Reedsy. I developed an interest into marketing for authors, like learning how authors marketed their books and seeing if I could help them with that. So I started freelancing a little bit on the sides, actually on our marketplace, like setting myself up as a marketer on Reedsy.
Okay.
And running Facebook ads for authors, running Amazon ads for authors, like setting up marketing launch plans, etc. And I did that for a few years. And at the same time, I started a newsletter on book marketing, sort of weekly newsletter where I would send some advice to your list. And every time I used to go to a conference, when you go to writing conferences and people don't necessarily know that you're with a company, the first question they're going to ask you is like, what do you write? And I hated not having a really good answer for that and saying, I don't write, I'm with Reedsy, etc. So I decided that like to write a book, and I used all these newsletters that I'd sent over the years, and I put together a book called How to Market a Book, which was the first book we published on Reedsy. And then since I promised that this would be the first book in a series, I thought I got to write another book now. And what I'd worked the most on was Amazon ads. That's what I'd spent most of my time. And so I decided to set out to write a book on Amazon advertising, which has gotten good feedback so far. And yeah, I'll probably have to write a third book at some point, but for now, those 2 out there, it's good enough.
The third one's going to be about?
I wish I knew.
I imagine that's a lot of work to write a book. Because I've thought of it as we've kind of moved into the KDP market and focused on. I was like, man, I should write a book just to get some like street cred with going to these conferences and talking to people. Because you're right. The first thing I ask you is, what do you write? Is like blog posts. I don't know. I can barely do that. So I'd imagine it was a lot of work, though. Do you consider yourself a writer, or did just kind of you had to force yourself to get in that mode a little bit?
Yeah, not really. I mean, yeah, I consider myself a nonfiction author, but yeah, not a natural writer. I like writing, but I procrastinate the act of writing by more than I procrastinate anything else. And so yeah, that's why having all those newsletters for the first book, I think, was really important, because otherwise I would have never finished a book if I started from zero. For the second book, I did start from zero, but yeah, I set up some kind of writing goals in our Reedsy writing tool that helped motivate me a little bit. And I had really clear idea of what I was going to do. Like, I outlined the whole thing, and I knew what I was going to write every day, more or less. But it was still a huge amount of work, which is why I'm really not looking forward to writing a third book right now. That's going to be just the two of those for a while.
It was obvious as going through your book, there's just all the detailed examples that you gave. I mean, even from your own account or somebody's account anyways, like just seeing and knowing that had to take just a ton of work to do it. So I'm glad you put it out. It's out there. I don't have to do it now. I'll just refer people to you. It's like, no, it covers it. It's good. I actually learned something from the book, which, doesn't happen all the time when I'm reading content. A lot of this stuff, it feels like we end up saying a lot of the same things over and over, and just kind of just drilling it in people's head. But I mean, there's some technical details and nuances, but I did learn something from it, which has to do with like the Amazon attribution, which I had no idea with KDP. It wasn't what I experienced with some of the other markets like Seller Central, Brand Halo. And it's when, for example, when someone clicks on your ad for one of your books, but they purchase some other product in your catalog, that ad doesn't get the credit unless that book that they purchased was in the campaign somewhere. Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. And maybe that's something a lot of people still don't know if they haven't read your book, if they've, maybe glossed over that section, but it's not something that's intuitive. And I've seen it with like Seller Central, anybody that's brand registered. Amazon does that work. They associate the products together for you. How'd you end up like getting to that conclusion? Was it just through like testing?
Yeah, it was mostly through testing. And I mean, when I decided to write the book, obviously I read all the Amazon documentation. And when I read the bit, like what they say is they're going to report and attribute sales of advertised products and other products in your brand. But what I knew from working with authors is that Amazon doesn't consider KDP accounts as a brand, because KDP authors can't have a store, for example. You cannot have like a store with all your books in there. You have an author page, but you don't have the store capacity. So at some point, some authors were able to get into Amazon Advantage and set up some Advantage accounts. And those Advantage accounts had access to stores, to Amazon attribution links earlier, to kind of a concept of brand, right? They could run also sponsored display ads. So they had access to like basic Amazon Advantage stuff, which they didn't have access to as KDP accounts. So I knew that brands were not a thing for authors. And I was seeing a lot of confusion out there because a lot of authors, obviously, they write in series, so they depend on read-through. You're not going to make your money back on ads with the sale of the first book in the series, usually. Like if, costs per clicks are quite high right now, maybe you're bidding, $1, you pay $1 per click, you need a good 5-10 clicks to produce a sale, and a book does not net you $5 or $10. However, if that's the first book in the series and the reader then buys a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, etc., till the 20th book, then suddenly you've made maybe 20, 30, 40 bucks back, right? So that concept of read-through is really important. And so I was surprised that there weren't a lot of resources out there talking about this super important topic, which is like attribution. If you don't put all the books in your series in your campaign, Amazon will only report on the sales of the book you're advertising, and you're going to miss a lot of read-through data in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, there's still limitations there too, because it's only going to be that 14-day window from click. Exactly. But it does capture more of that data for sure.
Yeah.
And this was even something that I was recently on a call with the Amazon engineers that we work with, and I asked him about this too, and he confirmed it, that this is how it works. You have to have those ads, all those products in a campaign. He did clarify that they don't have to actually be running. So if you still want
they can be paused.
Yeah, exactly. And just, throw them in a different ad group. And so I think there's different ways you could end up utilizing this, even just put it, if you have multiple series or standalones and things like that, you could put those all in a campaign, even though you just want to advertise one ASIN or ISPN and it, just put them in a different group and it pause, and it'll capture anything that's generating within the 14-day window, of course. So
Exactly.
it was really interesting. I think it's fascinating. You came to that just through testing. And I know I'm going to get asked this if there's anybody that's watching from our Merch on Demand audience, which is because what I've seen is that my suspicion is that Merch on Demand does work differently. I haven't confirmed this with engineers to verify. So just through what I've seen with the ad attribution is that they don't have to be in the same campaign, that there is a sort of brand halo product association, because we've seen where a product that's never gotten sales ever gets attribution for it, and it's the only ASIN in a campaign, which would mean they're, purchase one of your other product. I don't have confirmation.
That would make sense.
I'll have to find one of these Merch on Demand engineers. They're elusive, though. But I do want to talk more about attribution and I guess just like general challenges with the KDP, the unique challenges. And attribution is a huge portion of it, particularly anybody in KU, Kindle Unlimited, that relies on page reads, estimated royalties. I see the big ones there is that, the 14-day attribution window, but specifically the page reads only count if they're within that 14 days. And I think everybody knows there's some portion that happen outside that 14-day window.
Yeah.
And then the attribution, like you've already touched on with the series read through, where the ads contribute to your profit, but don't get credit for it. This is kind of a big topic, and it is challenging. I think it's a hard problem to solve. How do you navigate some of these challenges? Do you have any best practices or advice to authors out there that are dealing with this?
Yeah. So my recommendation usually is to kind of advertise, put all the books in the campaign so to get the maximum amount of data that you can get, and then try to break even on that data, right? So that's usually I see authors trying to, get really low ACOS sales and be as profitable as possible with their ads. But my recommendation usually is to try to break even, because if you're breaking even on that data that comes in within the 14-day conversion window, you're definitely making a profit, because there's stuff that's happening outside the 14-day conversion window, especially when we're talking about page reads for Kindle Unlimited, or especially for long series, multiple books. And yeah, so if you manage to break even with like what Amazon gives you, what Amazon reports on, then you're definitely making a healthy profit behind it. Also, like if you've got audiobook sales are not reported. You cannot advertise audiobooks. So those sales are never going to get reported in there. And we know that if you're running ads for ebooks and paperbacks and the audiobooks there's people who are going to buy the audiobook instead.
Right.
There's also an organic benefit to advertising, right? If you manage to get high enough in the ranks or in the popularity list, then you're going to get some organic visibility as a result. So my advice is almost always like aim for breaking even, or even like losing a little bit of money, because if you're there, you're actually earning money, and you're maximizing the reach you're gonna get from Amazon ads. If you try to get your ads as profitable as possible, you may get there, but maybe you're just gonna spend like a few $100s a month maximum, because you're using very low bids, and so you're limiting your reach a lot.
I feel the same way. I feel like that's probably one of the biggest mistakes I see from new advertisers, and it's understandable. You're in this new world of PPC and all the acronym soup, and don't really know what's going on, and if you just want to make sure you're making money, but you're leaving money on the table, and it's a bit of a detriment to your long-term success by limiting the amount of sales. I think that's a great practice. I'm glad you touched on like the organic lift, the sales velocity, as we like to talk about it, with paid ads contribute to that, and it's just this flywheel effect that keeps increasing sales, more reviews, gets you more organic sales, and so forth. What one other challenge? Do you want to talk any more about the attribution stuff, or is like as far as like measuring it? I mean, because there's still some challenges. Maybe before we move on to something else, I feel like there's a lot we could talk about here, I guess. But with like within the ads console, I mean, the other issue with it is that it doesn't show you. So like ACOS is a primary metric. I'd say as a seller, probably the most important. It's your ROI, what you're making versus spending. The challenge is that Amazon doesn't give you the tools to see what you're, as a KDP seller, with page reads what your actual return on investment is, compared to anyone that's just relying on order sales. Yeah. Do you have any words of wisdom for measuring that, or is it just something they have to just do manually to calculate, or should they just ignore it and try to come up with a higher ACoS that looks, 300%, 500% you see oftentimes in accounts?
No, I think for me, there's like two different options. If you don't have any books in Kindle Unlimited, so if you don't earn money from page reads and royalties, then the ACoS makes sense. Like it makes sense to look at the ACoS, and the only thing you need to figure out is like what portion of sales actually end up in your bank account, right? Because if we're talking ebooks, fully priced ebooks, then you make a little bit under 70% in terms of royalty rate. But if we're talking paperbacks, it's often like less than 30%, right? So if you advertise both in a campaign, you kind of have to work out an average, because if I'm advertising paperbacks and my ACoS is like 65%, I'm probably losing money. But if I'm advertising ebooks and my ACoS is 65%, then I'm making money. So you need to be very clear on like what kind of percentage of your sales actually end up as actual revenue. And if you have books are in Kindle Unlimited and a portion of your income comes from Kindle Unlimited, then the ACoS becomes completely useless, because it ignores half your revenue if half your revenue comes from page reads. Right. And depending on targets, like some targets, for example, if you target a keyword that's like epic fantasy Kindle Unlimited, that's obviously a keyword that's biased towards Kindle Unlimited. So if you get any revenue from that, it's 90% of the cases it's going to be page reads. Right? And if you look at your ACoS there, it's always going to be terrible. But you might actually be making a ton of money through page reads on that keyword. So the ACoS is completely useless for authors who have books in KU. So in that case, you need to look at your sales or your orders and the page reads and do a little bit of math to understand like what your revenue is. Or use a tool like Merjar that kind of does that calculation for you and tell you what I call the ACoR is, which is like the advertising cost of revenue. So like what your ROI is at the end of the day, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, computers are great at doing all that math. It's not necessarily hard math. It's just if you need to do that for every single keyword or campaign, that gets really difficult. And there are some challenges. It's something we deal with trying to solve these challenges, because our job's to just be able to show you the impact your ads are having on your bottom line. That's the ultimate goal, right? And that's difficult because of all these factors we mentioned, like attribution and organic lift, like those indirect sales that you just don't have data on. So we got to make a lot of these assumptions. So it can be challenging to find some of this data. Computers are great at that. You have tools. We at Mercer call it blended ACoS, and it's pretty much your profit. We're using your profit margins with your sales in order to combine that with estimated royalties. We just use that instead of sales and that ACoS conversion. So we've settled on blended ACoS, and maybe we need to like come to alignment on some of these terms. We had to like make up a lot of this stuff as we were creating it, because it's just not many people are doing this. There's not any tools that are trying to solve this. So it's like we're kind of on a new frontier with some of it. But
yeah, I think we're called true ACoS, KU adjusted ACoS, blended ACoS, ACoR, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's important that authors understand what it measures, basically.
Yeah, I think it's just as important as ACoS is for every other seller. It's that return on investment.
That's it.
With all these attribution things, I've had the suspicion that a lot of sellers are undervaluing their ads. There's a lot of KDP in particular. There's a lot of the impact that ads have that come on the back end that you indirectly from your ads, versus order sales where someone clicks on an ad, they just buy it, within the 14 days typically. Where KDP, that's not the case with that. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel sellers are undervaluing their ads and underspending?
Yeah, I see kind of both things happening. A lot of authors tend to be pretty cautious when it comes to marketing and advertising spend. And yeah, they basically want to make sure that they're at least breaking even, if not making a profit. And if they don't understand how attribution works, then they can make hasty decisions for sure. And sometimes like kill some targets that we're actually going to make them money down the line, especially with Kindle Unlimited and page reads. There's a lot of cases where readers in Kindle Unlimited, since it's a subscription, they can get as many ebooks onto their devices as they want, right? And since they can do that and probably do it, they're not going to read books immediately. Like if I'm a KU subscriber and I see this ad for a book that interests me, it's free for me to add it to my device, like to borrow it basically.
Right.
But it doesn't mean I'm going to start reading it the next day or even within 14 days, because maybe I'm finishing a book right now or I'm finishing a series.
Right.
I'm just like, ooh, this looks good for next month or 2 months from now. And obviously, whenever that happens, that's outside the 14-day conversion window. So there's no way to attribute it to the ad. So I do think that especially in KU, you might want to advertise at a loss sometimes. And what's important is to maybe on a quarterly basis or a couple times a year, just look at your KDP dashboard, look at the actual sales you've had, royalties from reads, and compare that to your spend and see how you're doing. Most successful authors I know, they don't spend more than 30% of their income back on ads, which doesn't mean you could go above that. You can go to 50%. And if the more you spend, the more money you make, then it's great, right? But yeah, I would watch that ratio. If suddenly you see that a big portion of your income actually goes back into advertising, there's probably a problem there. It means you don't have a lot of organic long tail, right? From your ads, which can be another problem. There are some people, some experts out there who preach not looking at the data in the Amazon advertising dashboard, and I do disagree with that. Like the data there is incomplete. It's part of the picture, but if you have good books and good series, you can break even on that. Like you can reach the break-even point. If you don't manage to reach the break-even point, then there's probably a problem either with your ads or with your products. But what I definitely wouldn't say is like, I'm not breaking even in the dashboard, but I am breaking even with my actual money that comes into KDP, because that doesn't mean that your ads are driving all your sales, right? And hopefully your ads are not driving all your sales. You want your ads to drive maybe 30% of your sales, and then readers who discover books through the ads then recommend your books to other friends, etc., to have that kind of word of mouth and that organic visibility that we were talking earlier. If that doesn't happen, then it's definitely a bad sign.
You've touched on a few great points, and I agree. You can't ignore the data that Amazon's giving you. If there's one thing Amazon's really good at, it's tracking data. The one point I want to, I guess, like hitch on to a little bit is you mentioned people being a little too hasty in making decisions. And this is, I feel, I probably say this too much, like one of the biggest mistakes new advertisers make is where they're too hasty with their decisions and turning stuff off, for example. And I know you talk about this in your book as far as like how many clicks before you turn things off. And I think that's one of the worst things that an advertiser can do, because in my opinion, finding out what doesn't work, that has value to it. It's just as valuable as finding out what does work. But that only works when you have enough data to be confident in that decision. Usually in the way of clicks and sales and orders and page reads is that volume of data. But if you're hasty with it and you pause things prematurely, you don't learn anything. You just don't have the data to know whether it would have worked or it didn't. And you literally set your money on fire rather than using it as an investment in that data and the knowledge you can gain from that data. Is there other, well, let's talk about maybe that portion of it, is like, what's enough data to you? Like when do you know? Because I think there's certainly a balance as marketers that we have to make of when do we turn things off? We can't wait for this 95% statistically significant confidence level, because
No.
I've tried to do some of the math, and I haven't done stats in a long time. That was years ago in college, but it's probably a couple hundred clicks per keyword that you would need, at least. In the broader it is, it probably goes much higher before you could have that confidence level. And we can't do that because everyone's got budget. That'd be fine in unlimited, if we had unlimited money to spend or it was free, but we don't. So like, where is that balance that we have to budget confidence with, budget, really?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question. I think that's sort of the $1 million question, that kind of click threshold when it comes to Amazon ads. So I think there's a few factors that come and play, at least when it comes to authors. The first one, what I like to call the revenue potential per click. Like if you got an extra click, what's the maximum amount of money that can net you, right? So for example, if you've got a series of 10 books, $3.99, you probably make, a couple dollars on each sale. So that's $20 of revenue potential, right? If someone with one click ends up buying your whole series, that makes you $20. So if you've gotten 20 clicks already and made 0 sales, right, there is still the possibility that the 21st click is going to bring in $20 in revenue, and suddenly that keyword that looked really terrible because, 20 clicks, 0 sales, probably around $20 spent, and nothing gained, suddenly that 21st click brings it to break even or maybe profit. So that's what I like to, it's what I call the revenue potential per click. And it's imagining if the next click brings me the maximum amount of money it can, does that change my opinion on the target? If it doesn't, then I'm happy to turn it off, right? If I'm at like 40 clicks, I spend $40. The next click in the best case scenario brings me $20. I mean, it's nice. It doesn't look as bad as it looked before, but it's still a loss. I'm still making a $20 loss. And also there's the second thing that comes into play is like the likelihood of that next click to have a completely different result than the previous ones, right? And I guess that depends on your usual conversion rate. I know when I advertise my books on Amazon, especially the free one, on average, I get an order every 5 clicks, right? Because it's a free book. So it's got a really good conversion rate. For most other authors out there, it might be 1 order in 10 clicks, 1 order in 20 clicks, right? So that comes into account, that comes into play as well. If I know I usually get an order every 5 clicks. If I have a target that got 15 clicks and no orders, maybe the 16th click brings me in the green, but how likely is that going to be the case when it's like 3 times my average and it hasn't brought any clicks? It's very likely that it's not a good target, right? So at that point, I could feel confident in turning it off. So that's kind of the 2 factors that I use. And the third factor is like how risk adverse you are as a person, right? I'm very patient. I don't like posting stuff early. So even with like 15 clicks, no orders, I'll still give it a chance. I'll lower the bid by a lot so that, if Amazon decides to not show my ads anymore for that keyword because my bid's too low, then I'm fine with that. But if it still wants to, and I'm not going to pay a lot per click, then I'll give it a few more clicks. Maybe I'll wait 20, 25 and then pause it if nothing happens. So yeah, that's kind of a personal decision at the end of the day. But I think using these ground rules of like, if the next click brought a completely different result, would that, change my opinion on that keyword? And also, what's my average conversion rate? Kind of 2 things you can use to determine what your click threshold is. I know a lot of authors use 15, 20, 25. I think all that is reasonable. It depends again on how long your series are, what your conversion rate is, and what your risk averseness is.
I mean, you kind of nailed it. I look at the same things and have the same range. I use conversion rate as my kind of guiding light in a lot of those cases. And that's usually because I get asked this all the time. I'm sure you do too. It's like, oh, when do I pause? How many clicks to pause? And everybody wants a hard number, what it is. I always just give the rule of thumb of using your conversion rate, how many clicks it would take to get a sale, and double it. And it's just like a simple, what conversion rate you're targeting. Just a real simple. Of course, every answer we can give is just, it depends. And, it's kind of a cop-out in some cases, which is okay. Do you have any consideration when it comes to the type of keyword it is and how broad the targeting is? Say an exact match that is only going to target a handful of search terms, that exact keyword itself and, the plurals and so forth that Amazon does, versus a broad, which could be, or even automatic, which could be potentially thousands of targets that these clicks are appearing on. Do you make any consideration when it comes to pausing the keyword, let's say on a broad match, or are you taking it a step further to go to the search term level and making considerations there instead?
No, I'm too lazy, I think, when it comes to search terms and broad matched and match types. Basically, I don't play with those enough. I do it a little bit by instinct, and I don't want to have like I don't want to have to add a million keywords. So like I might add how to market a book as a phrase and then how market book, or probably maybe as broad. And try to think in my head, like, what combinations could I be hitting there, and avoid combinations that I don't want to be targeting. For example, I don't want to be targeting marketing books, because marketing books is a different kind of search than, how to market a book.
Sure.
So if I put book and I put market, then in broad, then that's too broad, right? Or book and marketing is broad. But if I put book marketing in search or exact, then that already narrows down kind of the relevance. So that's how I do it. It's more intuitive. And then I look at the results of the keywords and I make pausing or like bit adjustment decisions based on the data there. But I don't do what I should be doing, which is looking at search terms, like adding more of these search terms to the keywords.
Well, it's a lot of work. And I guess what I was getting at with is like with a broad, like, okay, let's say you pause after 20 clicks and this broad match, all those 20 clicks, Amazon put on a single search term that just didn't perform, where, I mean, yeah, you could pause a keyword and just get rid of it versus maybe, negating the search term. But it is a lot more work. It's, on every keyword going into that. I was just curious if you had any differentiation or if you want more clicks on a broad match versus an exact match due to those, the targeting factors.
No, I don't use negative keywords a lot.
Oh, no.
I know I should, but I don't use them a lot except for, again, intuitive stuff. Like if I'm advertising, a sci-fi book and I want to negate everything that has to do with romance, alien abduction, alien babies, etc. Like that kind of stuff. But then when I'm going to set up a search keyword campaign, I'm going to try to put as broad a range as possible. And yeah, some stuff in phrase, some stuff in broad. And if the broad stuff doesn't work, I'll just pause it rather than adding a negative keyword, because I'm confident that I've got something in phrase match under it or in there that's just gonna still keep reaching the places where I want to reach. But I will say that like a lot of time for authors, except for nonfiction, like for fiction, what tends to work is ASINs, other book titles, author names, like the search keywords like epic fantasy or cozy mysteries or stuff like that. They're really competitive and they don't convert that well, just because like a reader of a particular genre, they're not necessarily going to, they know what kind of books they're looking for. Like if you're a cozy mystery reader, you're not going to search for cozy mystery books on Amazon. Usually you're going to search for your favorite author, or you're going to search for a particular book title, or you're going to browse through your Amazon recommendations that you already have there. You're not really going to use search that much. So that's what I've personally found, is that search keywords are not that important. So when it comes to book titles, the match types are not that important unless the book title is just one word, awakening, right? And awakening can be the title of an urban fantasy, an epic fantasy, a horror book, self-help book. And if you target out with broad, you can get anything and anywhere. So I try to kind of avoid those, or if they're very specific, use an exact match. But yeah, I basically make my match type decisions when I put the keywords in there based on intuition, and I don't tweak it as much afterwards. I should, but I spend very little time.
Is it mostly a time constraint as far as, I don't want people to get the impression like, no, negation isn't something.
No. Negation is something you should look at, definitely. I do think it's less important for authors than for other types of vendors or sellers.
Okay.
But yeah, it is something you should be looking at for sure. Like,
yeah, at least looking at search terms, because there's I can't tell you how many times I audit an account and then I see one search term that's got 500 clicks, that's got no sales. It's like, at least like take a look at this stuff, make sure you're not burning money. But it is really time consuming. I don't spend enough time on my own ads either. It's kind of ironic. We talk about ads so much and we don't spend enough time on our own accounts.
We spend more time talking about ads than, I guess, once you know the mechanics, you know what you should be doing. But whether you do it yourself, that's another thing.
It's a lot of work. No, this stuff is hard. I think Amazon ads is actually pretty simple at the end of the day. Like there's nothing challenging about changing a bid, about negating a keyword, adding a keyword. These are all very simple things. It's just the tediousness of it, having to go through the reports and filter everything and go to different screens and so forth.
I guess that's why you created a notification.
That's exactly why it's built, because I'm a seller and I'm a lazy advertiser, admittedly, and I'm so lazy that instead of paying for anybody, I paid a ton of money to build this software to just do as much as possible for me, and it does most of that. But yeah, so we've kind of talked about some mistakes and things like that, and you've brought up some keywords that you like to use, match types, ASINs. Do you feel like there's, or maybe not feel like, what is one campaign type or strategy or match type or anything in those lines that you feel is being underutilized by authors? They're not doing it enough.
One thing that authors, I think, are not doing enough is like try to anticipate book titles are going to get a lot of traffic. right? A lot of authors are going to look for targets in lists like the top 100 in their category or the hot new releases in their category, things like that. Or they're also bots but by the time books titles make it to these lists, they've already sold a lot of copies and received a lot of traffic, right? And it's time where you could have basically been targeting them and have appeared on their page and gotten a bunch of impressions and clicks. So you sort of missed that window of like how they become popular by getting all those sales. So my recommendation that I give more and more often these days is like, sign up. Like if you know that there's an author who works really well as a comp for you, like if you've targeted their name and that works reasonably well, then you want to maximize your exposure to that author. So sign up to their newsletter, follow them on Amazon, follow them on BookBook, follow them everywhere they are, so that you're the first to know whenever a new title comes out, right? Or they announce it or they put it on pre-order. Or if they run a promotion on one of their books, they drop one of their books to $0.99, you want to know it, like you want to be the first to know that. Because as soon as they do it, you know their entire mailing list is going to click on it. And I mean, not their entire mailing list, but a bunch of people are gonna head to that page and to grab the book at $0.99. So kind of try to anticipate the book pages are going to start receiving a bunch of traffic. There's also two events in the author world called Stuff Your Kindle Day and Zoe Bub. Zoe Bub is more for contemporary romance. And that's when like a bunch of authors drop their books to free. And they do a big Stuff Your Kindle Day promotion, basically. And when that happens, you want to know basically when that's going to happen. So you want to sign up to these newsletters as well, because if you have free books to advertise, that's an amazing moment to kind of beef up your budgets and advertise those free books, because you get a swathe of readers into the store looking for free books. And so suddenly your spend's going to go up and your conversion's going to go up and you're going to get a ton of free orders. But if you're not advertising any free books, what you're likely to see is a huge increase in impressions and clicks, but not necessarily conversion, because you're getting clicks on ads from readers who are there on Stuff Your Kindle Day for free books. If your book's not free, they're going to click on your ad because your cover looks nice. Oh, that's cool. And it's Stuff Your Kindle Day, so maybe they assume that everything on the store is free. So they're going to click on your ad, but they're not going to buy it because it's not free. And I've seen that a lot. Like I've managed several accounts, and on that day, big spike in clicks, impressions, and the only accounts for which it's been worth it is accounts who had a free book to advertise. So in my case, great. My book's not romance or anything like that, but it happens to be free, the How to Market a Book. So on any Stuff Your Kindle Day, I'm very happy. But I know a lot of other authors who are not happy about those days.
I've heard a lot of grumblings about these kind of days, and it seems like you either love it or you spend a lot of money. I think my experience kind of follows yours with ASIN targeting. Has been some of my highest volume keywords in general is the ASIN targeting. And there's just so much inventory for ads out there for ASINs, and they tend to be cheaper per click in my experience. And there's always new products coming out. I don't know how many books they're launching per day. I can only imagine, but there's always going to be new products. And it's hard to stay on top of. How do you feel about like automatic campaigns and category campaigns? Are you utilizing any of these to harvest some of these potential ASINs without having to do the manual work? Like maybe for us lazy advertisers out there that don't want to, jump through all those hoops to find, the books.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think category expanded ASIN are great to harvest, to harvest new ASINs, as you mentioned. For auto, for me, it's even more powerful than that. Like there's a lot of authors for which auto is the only thing that works for whatever reason. I do say auto needs some data in there. So I wouldn't just, as a new advertiser, set one auto campaign and then expect it to work. You do want to run some manual campaigns on the side, if only to teach Amazon and the auto campaign what works and what doesn't, right? I think other manual campaigns are going to help inform Amazon's auto targeting decisions. So I usually always have an auto campaign at least one running on the side of the manual ones, or even two split by type of auto targeting. Like,
sure,
I like having all four types of targeting sort of delivering impressions and clicks. And a lot of times when you have all four in one ad group, then there's just one or two that are delivering, and the others sort of get ignored. So if that happens, I like to split them up. Maybe I have comp and loose in one, and comp and subs in the other one.
I do the same thing. A lot of times I'll have 4 different, at least on the stuff that's
Exactly.
scaled, not like a new, because you need data, as you said. This is the most important thing with Amazon ads. You got to feed the Amazon beast data for it to use. So a new product doesn't have any of this. But yeah, I like to segment those out into different campaigns. For me, you get a little more control over the bids if you're utilizing placements or any of those campaign level settings, so it doesn't affect everything. So just a little more granularity. Yeah, I love the auto campaigns. I think it's a mistake if anybody is anti-auto campaign.
No, for sure. I mean, they can go after like brand keywords. That happens easily. But if you don't want them to do that, you just negate
it. Yeah, exactly.
You negate those brand. I would still have a brand campaign. I think at the end of the day, it's a personal question whether you want to target your own brand or not. My philosophy is that if you don't do it, someone else will. So it's going to be much cheaper for you to do it, so you might as well. But yeah, that
brand
I understand
stuff is interesting.
Or against it.
There's been kind of some like in the PPC space, not just in, outside of the author world, but just in the Amazon PPC space of some bigger advertisers that have tested this, because it comes down to like cannibalization a bit with your own branded stuff. It's like, I'm paying for this, but they would have clicked on it anyways. And this was a company, I don't remember the exact spend, but it was, well in the 6 figures per month spend. And they tested this and turned off all their branded keywords and didn't find a change in sales.
Interesting.
So it kind of leads to us like, what are we paying for? I think the general consensus came to, you just have to have a really high ROI on these, like, 20x ROAS return or 5% ACoS for it to make sense. This obviously is more like product focused, could be completely different authors. So I don't want to spend. Do you have any thoughts on that with like the cannibalization factor that could come with that?
I think, yeah, I agree. That's definitely a possibility. Like whenever I search for my own book, it's the sponsored result that comes first, and if someone inadvertently clicks on that, then I'm going to pay for it when the organic result is just below. And I do think that readers in particular, if they're looking for a specific book, unlikely they're going to click on something else. But at the same time, I don't know. I would have to experiment a little bit more, do that kind of experiment.
It's hard to test. Like even doing something to that, like you do need like huge budgets. So you're kind of taking just turn it off and see what happens. But it's still like, how long do you test for? Like any of this testing stuff is not easy, but it is interesting. But I have an account I manage with brands, and it never feels good to see like a $3 CPC on your own brand. But yeah, I thought that was interesting.
For authors, I think what I like about like brand searches is that for authors who have several series, then you can kind of cross pollinate a little bit, basically making sure that if reader searches for the last book in series A, then if I'm serving them an ad for series B, that's not a bad thing, right? Because maybe they're not aware of series B. So kind of targeting one series with the other, I kind of like the idea of doing that.
Or pen names
too lazy to do it, but yeah.
Or if you have different pen names, because I almost could see like each brand or each series operates almost like its own brand a little bit.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So
if you have different pen names, usually you're across different genres, so you don't really want to mix the readerships. But if you have different series within the same pen name, you definitely you can't expect readers to be aware of all your series. So I think brand advertising does a good job of that. And also it's nice, like if you scroll down on your own page or your book page and all your also boughts are your own books, and below that or above that, all the sponsored products are your own books, you're not losing any readers there. You know that if they click on anything on your page, it's going to end up on you basically.
Yeah, as you said, if you're not doing it, someone else is. So there's certainly value to having these brand defense type of campaigns, either targeting your products or your specific branded keywords. But we're kind of reaching the end here. I want to be respectful for your time, so maybe just touch on a couple things. One of the things I run into all the time talking with authors at conferences and so forth is the challenge of getting ads to spend. This is probably one of the most common things I hear from authors is they want to scale. They're running Facebook ads, and that's easy to scale. Facebook takes every single dollar that they'll throw at them. Amazon operates very differently, and a lot of authors struggle with scaling their ads, even though they have the budgets and they want to. Do you have a strategy when you encounter this?
There's a lot of levers you can try pulling. Bids, like raising your bids, is always sort of going to work.
101.
Obviously,
Right?
that's the first step. And a lot of times authors want to scale, but they don't want to, they want their ROI to remain the same. And that's kind of impossible everywhere. Sure, if you spend more money on Facebook, Facebook's going to spend it immediately, but usually your ROI is going to go down a little bit. Like it's hard to, and with any advertising platform, there's a sort of diminishing returns, right? So that's going to be the case on Amazon as well. It is easy to scale on Amazon. You just raise your bids, but you can expect your ROI to take a hit when you do that. Usually you should have some margin because again, there's like organic sales that come in and sales are outside the 14-day conversion window. So you usually can afford to raise your bids a bit. Then you can add targets, like looking for those hot new targets that haven't made it to the lists yet, I think is a great way of scaling. I've experimented with creating author-specific campaigns. So if I see that an author is working well as a comp, like I target their name and it works well, then I'm going to create a campaign just for them. And a campaign with targeting all their series, each split by ad group. So I'm going to have an ad group for targeting their series 1, and it's going to target the series name. It's going to target each individual book name. And then I'm going to have another ad group targeting all the ASINs and that series and etc. for all of their series. Basically, so I'm going to have a bunch of ad groups in there. And I'm going to make sure that any title that they have, any ASIN, any series name, any series ASIN, I'm targeting it within that campaign. So I'm kind of maximizing my exposure to that author. And those campaigns have worked really well. That they've been a good way to kind of scale the accounts. But yeah, short of that, there's no magic one. I think if your Amazon ads are working well already, then count yourself lucky to start with. There are some ways to scale. Try to raise your bids. Try author specific campaigns.
Read your book.
And yeah, read the book.
All this stuff we've been talking about, like this is like straight out of the book. All these different types of targeting and things like that, like I mentioned, I wouldn't necessarily be aware of because some of it is a little bit author specific or book centric that not, maybe there's some, some notes a product seller could lift out of it, but it's very book centric. So yeah, if you're looking for some of this stuff of new targeting ideas, there's a lot of that in the book. So check that out. We'll have a link to it. We'll figure out a way to do some kickback or something for it. But actually, I just want to sign copy. Next conference, I want to sign copy. I just have one last question, and this could be just a quick one, and then we'll wrap up. One thing sellers should stop doing or do less of that they're doing now, and one thing they should start doing that they're not doing. Could be Amazon ads or just anything in general.
So do less of, I think. So they should be less impatient, I think. That's something we touched on. Don't make hasty decisions. You said it's the number one mistake you see out there. I agree with you. So stop posting stuff when it's too early, when you don't have like data that proves that it's not good. And do think about Amazon ads as like one channel in your toolkit, right? The one thing about Amazon ads is there's a quality score, with your ads, and that quality score is going to depend on the existing sales and conversion of your product. So a lot of times I see authors struggling to scale, as you mentioned, with Amazon ads, and so they start running Facebook ads to the book, and the sales of the book increases, and suddenly the Amazon ads pick up because the book is looking more interesting in the eyes of Amazon. So if you're entirely relying on Amazon ads and your Amazon ads are starting to struggle, think about other ways you can send traffic to your book outside of Amazon. Kick the sales back up, and think of Amazon ads inversely when you're doing promotions, like when you're doing big promos and pushes. A lot of authors don't really think about Amazon ads because it's more of like a slow burn advertising channel compared to Facebook. But I've actually run some like Amazon ads during promos where I raised the bids like crazy and they got a ton of impressions and clicks, far from my bids, like still reasonable CPCs and crazy good conversion. So whenever you're doing a big push, big promo, definitely make sure to crank up your Amazon ads because suddenly they're going to start delivering a lot more impressions and clicks without you even touching them.
Great advice. Where can our audience learn more about you and Reedsy? If they want to work with you or find whatever it is they need for their books, where can they find you?
Yeah, so our website is reedsy.com, so reedsy.com. You can sign up there and you can find all the people we have on the marketplace. I myself don't work personally with authors one-on-one anymore. I'm focused on like writing the books. Yeah, it took a lot of time, but we have a lot of other marketers on the Reedsy marketplace. So if you're thinking about hiring someone to basically manage your Amazon ads for you, you can find some people on Reedsy who are going to be specific for authors. So basically who run ads for other authors out there. Then you can ask them for quotes. And if you want to get a hold of me personally, you can email me, ricardo@reedsy.com. It's a very simple email address. If you have any questions about Amazon ads or the book or anything, I'm more than happy to answer them. And for the book, just search for Amazon ads for all.
I'll put links. I'll have a link to the book directly. Yeah.
Perfect.
We're going to do all that links to everything. And one thing I want to point out about Reedsy, which I think is important, is that you guys have a very strict, or I don't know if that's the right word, but a vetting process for everybody on the platform. This isn't just like an open marketplace where everybody could just go on. You have a very thorough vetting process to make sure everybody on there is high quality.
Yes, absolutely. We accept less than 5% of the freelancers who apply to be listed on our marketplace. So we do a lot of vetting and a careful selection. And for the marketers, actually, I've interviewed all of them myself before having them on the marketplace. So I know that they can basically do what they say they can do.
I haven't been approved yet, so.
Have you applied?
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
It's how strict it is, but that's good. I think it was valuable to point out because it's not just, getting anybody like on Upwork. You can just hire somebody and whatever they say. So I think that's very cool what you guys do, because it is a challenge with hiring people for any position, really, especially if you don't have experience in that area. But Ricardo, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us and share insights. And for our viewers, we'll have all the links in the description. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for watching.